The worst people in the country are the people who have found their way to political office and dominate the Republican Party. Trump's vice presidential candidates are monuments of unfitness, selfishness, idiocy, imbecility, incompetence, dishonesty, and weirdness at an epic level. And we should think very carefully through each and every one of them about the lowness of these people under consideration for high political office who could, under the right circumstances, take the oath that John Kennedy took, that George Washington took. And should that happen, God help us all. It is May the 8th, 2024, and this is the warning. There are 181 days left until the American people decide who will be the President of the United States. May 7th is a monumental day in world history. At 2:41 a.m., there was a cable sent from the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force labeled Top Secret. The cable was authored by Eisenhower, and its message was simple. The war was over. The objectives of the Allied Expeditionary Force had been achieved. Nazi Germany was destroyed. The next day, the 8th of May, was declared to be VE Day, Victory in Europe. There were celebrations all over the world. The cost of the war in Europe was monumental. 1,000 years of civilization had been rubbleized in cities across the continent. Tens and tens of millions of people were dead. During those last months of war, what was uncovered was the full scale of the Nazi atrocities and genocide against the Jews. Places like Treblinka and Auschwitz and Majdanek and Dachau, and hundreds more camps where 6 million Jews were turned to smoke and millions more killed as well. The butcher's bill of the Second World War was nearly 80 million people around the world. 80 million human beings. When the war was over, the survivors, the political leaders, the rising generation that we remember now as the old men and women of the greatest generation who fought the war, understood that we would not survive the next version. And so for the last 80 years, there has been an understanding and appreciation that it was American power, American might, American restraint, a faith in a religion called democracy, a belief in human rights and the innate dignity of the human being, that the purpose of life was not to serve the state, not to wage war, not to enslave other people. The pursuit of happiness is at the core of this faith, this American creed. And now, at the edge of the long lifespans of the people who liberated Europe, who survived the death camps, there is a great test at hand. It is a test of faith and a test of memory. The question at hand is whether freedom will endure. Of course, there is threats and menace and evil in the world. What met it in the past were Americans of titanic stature and wisdom. And it is more than fair to ask in this moment, where are they? And where have they gone? Why is it that we would, as a great nation, in the third decade of the 21st century, ever tolerate such stupendous idiocy as this and this. Let's start with South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. Her interview with Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation was extraordinary. Psychologically, clinically, Kristi Noem was elected by the people of South Dakota to the United States Congress and also to be the chief executive of the state. She wrote a book because she's in contention for the vice presidential nomination in Trump's MAGA Republican Party. And there is nobody who holds a candle to Kristi Noem when it comes to sycophancy around Donald Trump. She's after the job hard. This is true. Kristi Noem had a sculpture commissioned of Mount Rushmore. And she had Donald Trump's face, his head, put on her commissioned sculpture of the famous mountain that incorporates the heads of some of America's greatest presidents like Teddy Roosevelt, Lincoln, and Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Trump. Kristi Noem has demonstrated that she's a deeply disordered personality, but more than that, an absolute totem of the dysfunction of our politics. Now, let's look at the issue at hand, which is her being caught lying about whether or not that she ever met Kim Jong-un. It's devastating, but I don't want you to watch it for that. What I want you to see is the utter and complete, total disregard for you, the disrespect, the degree to which she must feel that the people who see her are abject idiots, because she must know the idiocy that is spewing out of her mouth. She is caught red-handed here, but will not give an inch. Imagine that this is your teenager. Imagine that this is your spouse. Imagine that this is your patient in the mental institution. Let's watch.
You talk about meeting some world leaders, and one specific one, quote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I'd been a children's pastor after all." Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, you know, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits. So I'm glad that this book is being released in a couple of days, and that those edits will be in place, and that people will have the updated version.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
You know, I've met with many world leaders.
Think about this. In a nation of 330 million people, two major political parties, she is on the list to be a vice presidential nominee for a deranged 77-year-old accused felon on trial for the first of his 88 counts. She is on a pathway, potentially, to be the most powerful person on the planet. Let's watch again.
You talk about your time in the Armed Services Committee from 2013 to 2015. In that period of time, the leader of South Korea was a female president. I'm wondering, who is it that you confused Kim Jong-un with?
Oh, I think you need to remember, Margaret, and everybody needs to remember that I've worked on ag policy and federal policy for over 30 years. My time in serving and making policies in this country has been extensive and covered decades.
Right, but you never went to
I make
North
no
Korea.
specifics in this book. I talk about the fact that, yes, I have. I've been there. So
you went to North Korea?
You went to the DMZ, and there are details. There are details in this book that talk about going to the DMZ and specifics that I'm willing to share. There's some specifics I'm not willing to share with you. I've traveled the world and I visited with world leaders, and some of that is referenced in the book. And this anecdote is something that, when it was brought to my attention, we made some changes. And when the book's released, we'll do all that we can to see that that is reflected.
What type of people would accept this? Who would vote for this? If you live in South Dakota, are you not embarrassed by this? Do you trust her? Do you think Kristi Noem is on your side? This book is the single greatest accidental reveal I've ever seen about the character of a politician in my professional lifetime, which goes back a ways now. Extraordinary. Let's look at another competitor, South Carolina U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Now, this man did not quite distinguish himself during his moribund presidential campaign, but of course now he's back in contestation, competing against the likes of Kristi Noem and Elise Stefanik to be the vice president of the United States of America, next in line to the presidency. There is the most simple of questions that Tim Scott was asked. If you lose the election, will you recognize the legitimacy of the result by acknowledging the winner?
You voted to certify the election results of 2020. It's the exact opposite of what you said and did after 2020. Why would you want to be on a ticket with someone where there's such a fundamental difference?
There is clear facts here. President Trump himself said he expects this election to be fair, he expects it to be honest, and he expects to win. That's what the presidential candidate should expect, and I expect the exact same thing. And frankly, the American people agree with him. This is an issue that is not an issue, so I'm not going to make it an issue.
Well, Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
At the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump.
My friends, this is the basic requirement of living in a democracy. If you lose the election, whether it's for class president, for PTA, school board, whatever it may be, if the other person gets more votes than you, or in the case of an American presidential election, electoral college votes, guess what? You lost. And what that means is the winner, for a short time, prescribed by law, will be granted authority under the law to exercise responsibility mandated to them by the Constitution of the United States, to which they swear an oath of allegiance. This is the foundation of American society. This is how our civilization functions. It's how it works. You don't need to understand how electricity turns on the light. You don't need to understand how the internet brings the search. But you do need to understand how this works as an American citizen in order for the country to survive for your children, to prevent it from being taken and stolen. Because Tim Scott is saying something not just deeply amoral, but immoral. Not just something scary, but something dangerous. He is vandalizing with this answer the World War II memorial. He is vandalizing Washington's monument. He is vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial, and he is desecrating the Jefferson Memorial. What Tim Scott is doing with this answer is pissing on the grave of the unknown soldier. It's beyond a disgrace. It's a threat. Tim Scott on national television with Kristen Welker of Meet the Press is delivering a snarling, sneering warning to the American people. And the warning is, F you. We'll take power from you. It's ours. We're entitled to it. We deserve it. His message, delivered with the benign smile of an imbecile, is as deadly as it gets. Listen for it again.
Yes or no, will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
But is it just yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024?
I look forward to President Trump being the 47th president. Kristen, you could ask him multiple times.
Senator, just a yes or no answer.
So the American people will make the decision.
But I don't hear you committing
for President Trump. That's clear.
I don't hear you committing to the election results.
Here's the challenge.
Will you commit to accepting the election results?
This is why so many Americans believe that NBC is an extension of the Democrat Party.
He won't say that it's possible that Donald Trump could be rejected by the American people. And this impossibility, according to the seditionists, according to those who would burn down the republic, is worth the price. Because in the end, it will bring them power at the price of America. And that's what this election is about. It is the most fundamental of choices between liberty and autocracy. What Tim Scott is promising is your choices are gone. Your choice to choose leaders. If you're a woman, your choice to control your body. If you're a parent, your choice to decide for your children what is right, what is wrong, what is best, what is not. The state will take care of all of that. And when Donald Trump says, and Tim Scott looks away, that we'll monitor the pregnant women, remember this. When it comes to promises of imprisonment, when it comes to promises of mass deportation, when it comes to promises of deploying the military, when it comes to promises of being a strong man who will suspend liberties to restore order, there has never, ever been a person who made those promises, who took political power, who upon reaching that place didn't do exactly what they said they would do. And Donald Trump will be no different. The idea that it can't happen here is a delusion. The United States of America is under threat. And it's under threat from people like Kristi Noem and Tim Scott. The worst people in the country are the people who have found their way to political office and dominate the Republican Party. Trump's vice presidential candidates are monuments of unfitness, selfishness, idiocy, imbecility, incompetence, dishonesty, and weirdness at an epic level. Let's step back and at a very top line, look at these two people. Kristi Noem, who lied about meeting Kim Jong-un, who she absurdly claimed underestimated her, while assuring the reader of what she calls her important book that don't worry, I was a children's pastor. What a fool this woman is. And what a dishonest woman she is. And lastly, no joking, any person who would take a 14-month-old puppy to a gravel pit, aim a 12-gauge shotgun at its head and blow it away, destroying it gruesomely, is unfit for any position of public trust. And this man, Tim Scott, a United States Senator who will not cede to the possibility that in America, if you run for office, that you could lose an election, it is shameful. It is disgusting. And the burden of shame is amplified because he is a black man from the state of South Carolina, where the first shots were fired by the Confederacy at Fort Sumter, aiming to tear down the Union flag. Every senator of South Carolina carries that shame, carries that burden. What makes Tim Scott particularly reprehensible is he understands the history of segregation in his state. He understands the vileness of the political leadership that dominated it for 100 years. And he doesn't care. Tim Scott would burn it all down so long as he gets to sit next to Donald Trump, watching him do it. He is a most detestable man who has earned the contempt of the nation. Certainly mine, and I hope yours. This is the warning, and we should think very carefully through each and every one of them about the lowness of these people under consideration for high political office who could, under the right circumstances, take the oath that John Kennedy took, that Eisenhower took, that FDR and Lincoln took, that James Madison and Monroe took, that John Quincy Adams and his father John Adams took, that George Washington took. And should that happen, God help us all. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.